Good
Am I
morning.
hearing that?
This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the second edition of KYaks.guru. See, I got it right this time, Ken,
Yeah, we got it, Carl.
because Ken's going to yak a little bit, but you have a guest today. So tell us what today is going to be all about.
Well, today is a special day. You know, ever since I wrote the book about conversations, 50 years of conversation with the road warrior therapist, conversation has been part of my life in terms of a therapist, etc. Maria Seddio is the queen of conversation. She is a family therapist that I know for a good 30 years now. We go back together to the family therapy days in New Jersey, where she was the president of the New Jersey Family Therapy Association. She has gone on to have her own business in Corp Talk, where she is an effective teacher. And I'll let her tell you about what Corp Talk is. But she has now evolved and written a wonderfully beautiful book, which she'll tell you about, called Wash. And that has evolved to Washer Women Vote. And that brings us up to today. So I'd like to introduce Maria Seddio.
Oh, thank you, Ken, for such a great introduction and a wonderful memory of being active in the New Jersey Association for Family Therapy with you. We had, I think, a wonderful tour de force
Right.
of leadership during that period of time when we really re-examined the field and how to be more active as therapists and active in our communities. And I think our work and our conversations have always been along those lines. A difference in people's lives, particularly in these trying times. So I'll talk a little bit about Corp Talk, but then I really want to share with you more about WASH and Washer Women Vote and why it's so important right now. So Corp Talk is a consulting firm that I founded about 25 years ago that looks at the art, science, and practice of conversation. We really believe that if organizations change the way they engage in conversation, we could have a transformative work experience, not only in the sense of well-being, but also in the ideation and in the innovation and in exploring how we can break through to our next models of economic vitality, right? And inclusion and participation in the workforce, in a new workforce of, say, the 21st century. So that's Corp Talk. But WASH actually preceded Corp Talk. And WASH is it's a way of honoring the legacy of our mothers and our foremothers who down at the riverbanks, in their backyards, in the laundromats and in the wash places around the world, would come together and talk about things that were really important and to support each other, show up every day, do the hard work of living, even though there was no end in sight, and care for each other. And I look at how that model is a model that can offer us a lot in this period of time, a way of bringing people together and solving some of the larger social problems that we're all faced with. So you and I have had lots of WASH conversations over the years. I remember when I first introduced the work to you that you told me, I'm not sure I have a WASH story, Maria. And then you were driving back and you called me on the road and you said, I think I have one. And you told me the story of a film, and the name eludes me right now, but it was about a soldier who was killed, and the officers fellow soldiers come to his home to tell his mother, and she's at the wash line. That's where she receives the news. And you called me back and you said, I remember this story. And then from that story, you started sharing more. but it was also about your social conscience and about your commitment to peace and to bringing people together and to community change. And we went from, I don't have a wash story, to a reference in a film, to a bigger consciousness. And I think that is how our relationship really is founded on those kinds of conversations.
And we realized everybody has a wash story. Everybody
Right.
has a family wash story that they can tell. I mean, I
Totally.
remember my mother in the basement with the old Ringer washing machine, where she would by hand with the turner and stuff like that, and then
Yeah.
would help her hang the wash out on the line, and she'd
Yeah.
have to climb the pole, and I mean, and then we would
Yeah.
tell the stories. That's the most important part of it, is
That's
telling
right.
stories while you do it. Why don't you tell us about how the book was made? I think that's a fascinating.
Well, the book is interesting because it's really an artwork, right? It's a handmade book. It was made in cooperation with the poet Amber Past and the bookmaking and paper making cooperative in Mexico called Taller Leñateros. And we worked together to create a handmade book, handmade linen and embroidered with prints that are that really exalt the washerwoman as the Madonna, really the center of the community and also of connection. And the book was, again, handmade. It's created like an altar because it is in adoration of these women who showed up every day, did the hard work, took care of all the needs of each other, their families, their communities, the kids that were by their side, just what you recounted. That's a modern day version of, you know, a boy going out with his mom while she's hanging the laundry and help me, you know, pass that to me, or telling the stories. And I think written history is, we pay a lot of attention to it, of course. You and I love to read, and we both like to write. But written history is only 0.5% of representative of women's history. 0.5%. When you think about that number, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's unbelievable. So where are the real stories of women? Did they not exist? Were they not important? The washerwomen's stories are a way of really going into an examination of how we disregard whole groups of people, whole populations, because we don't make their stories visible. We discount them. And this is one way of bringing attention to that in the largest possible scale.
And it's
So
universal
the book,
in all cultures.
right.
I mean,
Universal, absolutely. And the first question is it a boy or a girl, right? You know, is it a boy or a girl? And those splits, those categorizations, those classifications get made, often with bias and prejudice embedded in them. I mean, that goes into class, race, ethnicity, gender. I mean, we can go on. We have far too many things that divide us out and keep people from being central to the conversation, central to the community, central to the decision making and the policy making that really sets up how well we live together. So
I remember getting wash in my head, and then everywhere I traveled in the world, you would see these lavanderias, public wash places where the women, and it's all over Mexico, these huge stone lavanderias where the community came and washed. And then the washed lines. Everywhere you go in the world, you'll see somebody hanging up wash at the back of an apartment house or out on a little cabin. The greatest one I ever saw was on the South China Sea, where the Vietnamese live on riverboats out in the middle of the sea. And they have the wash line running around the outside. It's just a 360 wooden pathway around the house, and it always has a dog and the wash hanging up. I remember taking these pictures and sending them back to you.
Yes, I still have those. It was, you know, a beautiful memory that you shared with me, and you feel the experience, right? There's no guise to wash. There's no artifice. It takes us really down to the essentials of humanity. this essential way we connect. The metaphor works to wash away all of the, again, the artifice, the bias, the prejudice, so that we can really come together in a way that is just natural, what we were born to be, you know, with each other, connected to each other, caring for each other, and also doing the work. It's not Pollyanna. It's not simplistic. We do carry the heavy loads. You know, you do the work of daily living.
I mean, the
Yeah.
theme of conversation, Maria and I used to do workshops together, and
Yeah.
we'd get maybe 40 or 50 people in a room. And, you know, that awkward silence in the beginning where you say, well, we're going to get everybody to talk today and tell you stories.
Yes.
And everybody shuts up immediately. And there's this awkward tension and being like, I'm not going to tell my story first. And
Yeah.
we would work for a couple hours. And by the end of it, it felt like it was one big family where
Beautiful.
people were fighting to get their story in, wanted to
That's right.
tell
That's
what
right.
it was, because we learned how to be effective communicators. And I think
Yeah.
Maria's got a million stories in terms of how she does that. Well, why don't you
Yeah.
tell us something about, you know, the skill base that you have that lets you do all this?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a skill that we all have to a greater or lesser degree, and it's like a muscle that can always be strengthened, and that's the ability to listen deeply, not just to the words, right? But what's underneath the words, what's being said underneath the words, what is omitted from the story, where is there hesitancy in telling the story, where is there celebration or exuberation, to really, really listen in a way that's, I call it empathic, deep empathic listening, like where you absorb the story from someone else. And it's interesting because in the listening, I mean, this is where the magic of storytelling really plays out, right? You understand this, Ken. You have to, there's a little space between the telling of the story and what the listener hears, that listener's experience. It cannot be perfectly mapped. There's an uncertainty, a tension, an energy. I call it the creative energy of the story, or the crucible where there's heat, often a little bit of tension, and the listener takes it in and owns it, him or herself. And for me, that kind of listening, that kind of deep listening, you and I have dedicated our lives to this.
It's essential to the work we do. When you're a family therapist, most of the time you meet a family and you meet them all at once, and they each have a different perspective on what's going on in their home, their story, their family story. So after listening to each different person and their input and what they tell you about their story, the magic becomes in what Mnuchin used to call the reframing, is when you tell the story back to them.
That's
and
correct.
you change it. You reorder the story you've heard so that it's a much more acceptable position for them to see themselves.
Yeah.
And
to
there
have a
is
different experience, right? Yeah.
There is the change. I remember back when we both worked together, we had a supervision group, but that grew out of the town that we lived in. I used to get referrals and treat families, and we'd see that the kids were in trouble, and the kids would be in school, and they would have a meeting, a guidance meeting about their case. And so if I had a client, I wanted to go to the meeting. And so the first one I went to, I heard what to me was the oldest medical model in the world. Here was a psychologist who only gave tests, a nurse that only counted the amount of office visits for sick stomachs. And then they had, the psychologist with their tests would give you their results. And the psychiatrist would come in and medicate the child or send them to an emotional.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the conversation in that room, to me, lacked one ingredient, the idea that the patient was the kid. And so I was so upset with that, because in family therapy, there is no patient. The family is the patient. The whole conglomeration is together.
Yeah, the
So I went
conversation
back to the,
is, yeah,
I went to the director
exactly.
of the guidance, and I said,
Yeah.
listen, you guys don't have a psychiatric social worker on staff, and nobody here is really interviewing the parents. And how can you treat a child when you're not treating the whole story? You're not getting the picture.
That's
Let
right.
me make you a bet. Send me 3 patients. I'll do the 10 sessions. I'll meet the child once, but I'm going to work only with the parents. And after 10 sessions, you tell me whether the kid is still acting out in class. I'll bet you that there is a reduction in the amount of disturbance that the child shows up at school. Because my belief is they're bringing home to school. Well, I went 3 for 3. So they made me part of the child study team.
That's
And
great.
from that
By the
position,
way,
then
every child study
Maria
team
and
should
I,
have a family therapist, right?
right. And then when Maria was president of Family Therapy Association, she let me run amok. And what I did is I used the model that I had created in Westfield, do it in all 21 counties of New Jersey, where we now got social workers on the child study team, and we changed the story. The conversation in the room was not about a sick child. It was about making a family healthy and making the school interact with the parents rather than just telling the parents which school or which medication they were going to give their child.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that Maria let me get this program going.
No, it was a beautiful program, and I think, you know, we both know that we don't diagnose people. Um, I diagnose conversations. Is the conversation sick? You know, is the conversation, what will bring it back to life? What will provide some vibrancy, some aliveness, some sense of participation and belonging to this conversation? So I really I don't think I even see individuals at all in that way. I really see conversations, systems of conversations, and the ability, you know, what is the relational health that supports the conversation? How is the relational health created in conversation? And how is it represented? So it's a different view entirely. And I think we share that in terms of how we approach something that would be problematic.
Which makes WASH so powerful, the universality of it and the idea of people coming together and talking while doing another task. It wasn't that you were coming to talk, you were coming to do something else, but talking is what happened, and that's how the folklore gets passed down from generation to generation. I think
for sure.
Yeah,
I think we should look
how
at
can we keep
what
this
we're
going?
trying to do. I'm sorry.
How can we keep this going? Because the younger generation has a different form of conversation. Their conversation is texting, emojis, and sometimes I find that when you are in their presence and want to have a conversation, they'd rather show you their phone or their tablet. So how does this change going forward?
That's great. I want to add to that, Ken, and you're going to have a lot, I know, to say. So I'd like to say 2 things about that. So part of that, the tablet becomes part of the conversation. Yes, for sure. I mean, we're not going to be able to get rid of all of that. So sometimes communicating in all means, whatever's available to you, but not principally through electronic means. Kids are dying to have conversations with people who listen. It's magical. It is so powerful, and we've forgotten how to do that. We've forgotten. We're generally overworked, overstressed, overworried, you know, and especially now. I mean, more than ever right now. We have we've had social problems that have plagued us, and now we have COVID that is the overlay and putting more stress than ever on families. But kids are dying for that connection. And just as Ken described, you know, my mother was doing this, and I was talking to her. She was sharing the stories. I was handing her a clothespin or what have you. That can be recreated by cooking together, or by just doing things together, by being together. And we really need to talk more about what that looks like, and then commit to just being there, quieting us down a bit so that we can actually be in the presence of each other, which is a
I'm more
challenge.
concerned about the teenagers and the young kids today, in terms of that their ability to talk to one another.
Yeah.
Their method of talking has changed. You'll see 4 teenagers sitting at a table. Each of them will have their phone in front of them, and they're texting one another. They don't
Mhm.
even talk. They
That's
just
right.
text. So to reach them, I think Karen's point is fine. That to reach them, we have to reach them through their medium. And you see, they can be effective. I mean, it started with the Arab Spring, where everything was online. Uh, you see how they got together and they sabotaged Trump's Tulsa meeting, where
Yeah.
they used
We
the
see the
internet. They
best
used,
and the worst of that, right? And
yeah.
we're seeing the best and the worst use of that kind of communication. And it's really powerful. And now it's added an element of how we communicate. But I still think, and you've probably had this experience, I've had it so many times and I've observed it so often. You have a group of adults getting together, they're talking, and all of a sudden you see the kids coming out and they're hanging around. They're just hanging around. They might sit on the corner of the sofa or on an armchair. Maybe they don't say anything at all, but it's like a gravitational pull. You can feel it. When adults are engaged in really interesting conversations, kids want in. But the challenge is how can we re-engage adults? How can we re-engage our not tuning out because we're distracted by one stress or another? It's really about re-engaging for adults, making that commitment, finding joy in each other and in the listening. You know, what I didn't mention was that WASH came out, like many things. It was spurred by grief work. My mother used to hang her laundry out in the backyard, and you know, it was like a sanctuary back there. She would talk to Mrs. Engel or Mrs. Weber, and they would share their stories, who was mad at this, who was happy about that. But nonetheless, there was a gravitational pull. It was an incredible sense of belonging. And I think that it was also true for them. They got out of the house. I'm talking about a certain generation of women. It's different now, but there are some similarities that have gone underground. So they got out of the house, and when my mother was starting to really fail and couldn't get outside anymore, couldn't hang her laundry, a poem just burst into my head, and that was, my mother didn't believe in church. She believed in hanging laundry. You know, and I really realized like that was it. That connection was what really reanimated her soul. And I think WASH is dedicated to that experience, to creating that spiritual, that personal, that relational space and sanctuary for others. It's grown, as you know. I have a collection of thousands of pictures, lots of art. It's in music. It's everywhere. What you said was very interesting. You can't see a laundry line anymore. Well, yes, Schopenhauer said, thus the task is not so much to see what no one else has seen, but to think what no one else has thought about that which everyone sees. And
Right.
that is, you know, the laundry line now, I hope, when you see it, it feels like a spiritual sanctuary, like a way of honoring all the women across all time, and men too. I mean, it's a metaphor, right? So it's gender inspired, but it's not limited in that way. And I think that's important. This is about all of us. And it blossomed into a much bigger social conversation. We talked about you bringing lots of people into the family therapy. We need to bring family therapy into our society, into our communities. We're seeing our communities struggle and suffer so. So WASH for me was always about taking family therapy, the understandings, the insights, the observations, the sensitivity around relationship and how we connect, and bringing it into a larger social conversation one in which we are inspired to become our best selves, hardworking, committed. You know, the archetype of the washerwoman is an archetype that is spirited, straightforward, hardworking, but also very emotionally rich and understanding. There's a lot of compassion and caring in that archetype. And I think that's the combination that the work promotes. How do we do it? We need to have educate ourselves, re-educate ourselves to do it, because it doesn't fall from the sky.
And it's very empowering. I mean, with the whole emergence of women in politics and women having power for the first time, that you see much more representation of women having a voice and
That's right.
fighting against sexism, fighting against all of the historical male dominance and abuse. I see it
Absolutely.
now as you know, the natural evolving of washerwoman to washerwomen vote.
Yep.
That the
That's right.
power of one woman, who maybe that's all she does is hang, wash and wash, but she has the same power as anybody else if we can mobilize the message, get it out there, and
That's right.
have now a vast registration process to
Yeah.
make sure that everybody votes in this election. Because
Absolutely.
from where we are in our position now, we're voting for the survival of the country. We're fighting for
Absolutely.
democracy.
The family. Absolutely.
You know, we're being attacked from within. We really have a cancer in the White House, and you know, he's crippling just the way the government functions. And
I think you have to say, what is the conversation? In my world, I look at a leader being, and I see leaders as in multiple. It's a collective action. I don't, you know, it's not about the one person, right? But about being in the conversation. And you say, what is the leadership conversation? It's obviously lacking. A leadership conversation does not divide out people. A leadership conversation does not mock people. A leadership conversation does not diminish women or incite racism. That's not a leadership conversation. So I'm going to take the individual, the person, out of it. I'm going to say, what is the conversation that's being hosted right now in our country by our most influential leadership? And it's broken. The conversation is broken. We can mend it though, because everyone counts in the conversation. That can start anywhere. And everyone, we have so many examples to draw from. In Washerwoman Vote, it is about the power of the washerwoman and the indomitable spirit and the responsibility we have to show up and vote, because these are the women who fought for that right. These are women whose lives have been really circumscribed by bias and prejudice and limitations about how they can participate in society. We cannot take that vote for granted, not at all. It's being challenged. None of us can take that for granted. It's very interesting because I mean, a lot of political action has come out of the washerwomen culture. So in France in the 1700s, there were laws that required that the lavoirs, the communal washing places, were within the seeing distance of the magistrate. Why? Because they believed that when washerwomen got together, there was going to be trouble. Good trouble. Good trouble. That's what we're talking about. Creating good trouble by bringing it to the wash place, by bringing it to our center, our conceptual space. Our conceptual space supported by a large conversation, and then educating everyone around the importance of voting, how to vote, how to make sure your vote is safeguarded and your neighbor's vote is safeguarded, whomever they're voting for. Right? And to make sure that we really recognize and empower through our conversations those who maybe felt they were not invited to the table, or those who have been deliberately pushed away from the table. that's washerwomen vote.
My
Wash, I want
concern
to
now
say,
is for the young people. I saw a statistic from the New York Times the other day that said they only expect about 45% of the new young people to actually get to the ballot. And that to me is very scary, because we have to find a way to include these emoji cell phone kids, to get them to get involved, to realize that this is about them. Then maybe at 18 you don't realize the consequences, but maybe at 21 you do. And presidents run for 4 years, so it's
yeah,
bringing them in. And how do we get to them? Every kid who leaves home from college and goes into their own apartment all of a sudden is now a new washer guy or a washer woman, because now they don't have mom in the house laundry.
you gotta go. They have to schlep
And
it.
how
Yes,
do we get them? I see them as the new generation. How do
for
we get
sure.
them?
Well, as much
engaged?
as Ken, I think you're describing a schism, right? We have incredible young people. The young people are driving the current social revolution. Students who were in schools that were affected by mass shootings, stepped up to really be frontline leaders and mobilize. You talked about shutting down, a rally. Because K-pop fans got on and bought tickets or claimed tickets. I think that they're very creative. I have a lot of faith actually in young people. I'm inspired by them. I see the wash line as a generational a connection. My mother's church was a line of rope. She stretched over time to me. And I really experienced the wash in that way. And I have stretched that line to my daughter, who stretched it to her friends. And I have friends who have brought their children into wash conversations. So for me, I think the new generation is amazing. They inspire me every day, and I have faith in them. We have to disconnect from thinking that when we text something or when we post something, we're done. That's only one part of the equation. It's an important equation. These are important conversations, and unless they're fomenting hate or really a prejudice and bias, then they're healthy conversations, because they allow more participation, and they allow people to really express themselves in multiple ways. But if it stops there, then it's counterproductive. And that's what we're seeing sometimes across all generations, but particularly in generations where they've been indoctrinated to electronic communications and are so used to that being a way of how they live and how they relate. So I think all in all, they're the most inspiring group. I want to just shout out my appreciation. They've really shown this country the laundry, right? The dirty laundry, and looked at it and said, my generation is looking at you, right? Climate change, social unrest, racism, exclusion. We are getting involved in more vocal and demand from you. Been waiting for you, right? We've lost. It emerged from actually meditation, a real concern. How were we as a country? How is it that we could be so split when so many of us have the same worries and concerns? We're concerned about paying our rent, about our kids' health, about the future, about the quality of the food and the water that we consume. So how is it? And you have to say, well, it's an intentional conversation to keep people apart. It's an intentional conversation to make people think that the other is the enemy. So what is the conversation then that addresses that changes them? That's how Washerwomen Vote came up, because we realized that so many people, if the people who were most affected by policy got together to enact policy that would support most of the people, we would solve a lot of the problems we're faced with today.
Yeah,
right?
we have to combat what has happened in the last 3-4 years in terms of divisiveness, how we are split. It's almost, Republicans think of Democrats as evil, and vice versa. And when I was a kid growing up, when we had Eisenhower, you couldn't tell the difference between a Republican and a Democrat. One was a little bit more to the right of center. The other one was a little bit to the left of center. But it was generally, they talked to one another and things got done. I mean, and now we've been pushed apart. I heard yesterday the president, when he was talking about the COVID, he said, our people are now getting sick. As if, well, who are the other
Yes,
people?
of course, of
I
course.
thought this was
Yes.
the president was supposed to be of all the people. And what we are trying to
Yeah.
do, I mean,
No, it was black and brown people and
women,
essential
it's all-
workers. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but I think we have to call it out. It's black and brown people, essential workers, people who have to make a living, who take risks, who then are at a cash register and somebody comes up to them and coughs on them because they asked them to put on a mask. I mean, these things are happening and they're not healthy and they don't need to happen, because underneath it, there's a desire to disturb and to split out the population. And the reality is that, when you have groups come together around common shared interests, in the 60s, and you and I was just a kid, but and so were you. But you had the Poor People's Campaign, you had the Civil Rights Movement, you had the Women's Liberation Movement, you had the anti-war efforts, you had you had the farmers, boycotting and starting the farmers' rights. All of that coalition came together. And I think that it was such a powerful coalition that that it was a threat. When people come together and they come together to work together, it threatens, some of the powers that become more powerful as a result of hate and bias and unrest. And I think we can change that conversation, though. We don't have to participate in that conversation. We can create a conversation to bring people together. And the basis of that conversation, for me, has always been the WASH line. So WASH is we all have to do our brainwashing, reverse brainwashing. We've all been indoctrinated and enculturated into all sorts of beliefs, whether we're conscious of them or not conscious of them. We swim in a sea of cultural bias and systemic exclusion. And we have to work on that. We have to examine and talk about it and then make those connections and then weave that into policy and activism. Washerwomen Vote is the manifestation of the insights that WASH, as a consciousness raising social conversation, promotes, transforms into
So
Washerwomen
the
Vote.
question, Maria, is here we are in COVID, and we can't get together outside. We can't have the town meeting where you go and you talk and you do all that. We have to do it now like we're doing it here. We got Ohio, New Jersey, and New York on a internet conversation
That's right.
about the problem. So we
That's right.
have to figure a way on how to do it online with these podcasts, with other kinds of ways, so we get the message to people that we can have a huge conversation if we want.
Absolutely.
We just have
Absolutely.
to have technology, and we have the force of people learning how to do it, because how to get the messages we agree on. It's
That's
now
right.
how to get it out there.
Well, and
That's exactly right.
I also think it's part of it is that we all, like you said in the beginning, Maria, we have to listen. The problem in a lot of conversations is you're sitting on the edge of your seat to say something that
Yeah.
you don't even hear what is being heard. And what I've appreciated today in this podcast is that it's bringing up a lot of memories from my past that can make me a better person today,
Yes.
things that I forgot about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Karen, that is, thank you
Yeah.
for, that's what we hope for. That's how we've dedicated our work, our lives to exactly doing that. I just had a conversation with a business leader yesterday. I interviewed her about some work, because it was actually like hosting WASH conversations in corporations. And it's amazing that, you have stories behind everybody's career, right? That unless you examine them, unless you ask, hey, tell me about someone who influenced you, but not in the traditional sense, right? And then and tell me about your WASH story. And I'm so privileged to hear stories of like profound formation, right? These formative stories, these identity forging stories, that somehow the metaphor of WASH bypasses a lot of the nonsense. People can relate to it. It's universal. It's renewal. It's a loving space. It's a safe space. And those memories you're describing, Karen, they surface. And when they surface, they're gifts to us, because they can enrich the conversations we're having, the sense of possibility we bring, our sense of strength, of imagination. So I love that you're having some of that experience. I hope it continues. I hope for anyone who's listening that you're thinking about the stories we're sharing, and stories of your own are coming to mind, and that tonight or later on, or with whomever you are right now, you start the conversation and ask about their WASH stories, and you ask about stories that might be difficult. One of the things about WASH is that these are hard stories too. Sometimes they're wrapped in pain or shame. There's stories that, we never honored the washerwoman. We categorized certain trades or certain professions or certain ways of working, all with a tremendous dignity, but we categorize them as less important. And I think that I really, through the archetype of the washerwoman, I want to challenge that, like, powerfully. Where?
Maria, when I first heard about Corp Talk, I've never been in the business world. I've never been a corporate guy. I've never had that kind of job. I've always been a free spirit. And when I heard about you wading into the corporate world, and I said, they're going to eat her up. They are just, because they're all about profit and the bottom line and this and that. And, here she is, all about humanity and individual stories and love, kindness, sharing. And then how do those two go together? Well, the idea being that is, if you can change what matters in a corporate environment,
Yeah.
My cousin was a Wall Street broker and a Buddhist. And he had to leave Wall Street because his ethics were screaming to him in the middle of the night about the people he was working with, etc. And so he founded his own company that does corporate work for good. He does things that benefit mankind. He does things that makes products. He'll invest in things that are good for us rather than something that just makes money. And I still cringe when I hear the word corporate and I see those suit guys walking along, because I think they are devoid many times of the essential ingredient of community and of effective communication. And the fact that you're in there with your rowboat against these big ocean liners is like, it's for all of us. You're representing all of us in the process of change, so that we can change the dialogue and change the meaning of what they do, so that maybe the product that they produce turns out to be something we need and that we want, and it doesn't hurt the planet. So
Yes. And I
think
think directionally, Ken, there's a lot of opportunity there. And when you talk about corporations, what are they? They're human systems, right? They're large gatherings of people. Somehow there's a system that underpins it that says profit at all cost, right? And we have to examine that. It's not working for us. We have to examine it. Does it mean I don't believe in business? No. Does it mean I don't believe in entrepreneur? Absolutely not. I am one myself. I support people to succeed in business. When you go for a CAT scan, if you have a good CAT scan, it's a result of if it's an accurate CAT scan, it's because the equipment was good, because somebody created a business that ensured that you were going to get the best quality medical testing, for instance. Right? When you go and you buy a car and you get in and the car is solid and it's supportive and it's beautiful, it's because those come out of large corporations. So I'm not anti.
Are you getting good healthy food in the supermarket, or are you getting chemical processed stuff?
Exactly. That's what needs to change. But I think it's the moral compass of the buying public that says, you know what, we don't want that. We won't support you, and it won't be profitable. And that means that the individual investor and consumer needs to become more aware. We educate ourselves every day. There are things I learn weekly that I go, really, that company? Gee, I thought this or that about them. So we have to and that's where the internet can be very helpful. If it's sharing accurate information, we can make informed choices. I think what I've seen, in my private practice, people would come, and a lot of the problems that were experienced personally were happening at work, and they would describe the most toxic kind of environments. And I thought, well, gee, I'm here in family, seeing families, maybe 3-4 couples, etc. But these are large systems that are in need of the kind of relational health and focus that we do in our work. Our work is transferable, and I think I've proved that because, I've worked with, tens of thousands of people. In the latest project I'm involved in, it's over almost 50,000 people. So that the work affects 50,000. Obviously, I'm not meeting with 50,000 people, but the work, the dialogue, the concepts of relational health, the ability to come together and engage and to be in the conversation, that is something that can change a corporate culture. And I have had that experience bringing these ideas in as new, fresh ideas, but they're ideas that people gravitate to. Why? Because we are built to connect. We're built to communicate. We're built to also aspire to be better, and to bring out the best in ourselves. I think that is also the call to action right now. Bring out the best. Yeah, the best is voting as a citizen, right? Being informed and voting is a best action. As a corporate.
I am a washerwoman. I vote.
Yeah. Yes. I'll send you.
I am a washerwoman. I vote. I want everybody.
I'll send you. Karen, you'll be on the list too.
Very good.
We originally were going to bring it to the communities and go into laundromats, and we launched in January. We launched on Martin Luther King Day, and it was disappointing when we obviously can't go into communities, so we've really had to revamp what we're doing on our website, washerwomenvote.com. There's a lot of information about voting, how to vote, how to register, lots of organizations that are great. There's great information. It's a knowledge base, but it also asks you to connect your vote to your washerwoman, connect your vote to a story, to somebody else, someone, and it could be in your family of origin, but it should be someone you relate to. It could be a story you read or someone you know about, and do that. Make your vote mean something, and also pay attention to what we're missing when we're not telling those stories, because we're so busy. I mean, I love to hang out and watch a Netflix or whatever. But Netflix isn't real life, right? Television, series they're not real life. Real life is what we're doing right now. Real life is, what people are trying to do in the street to communicate a message, to say, this is important. Black Lives Matter. And this is important. And we want you to pay attention. We want you to leave your television set and come with us, peacefully sit with us, and make sure we can create a conversation that says, this has to change, right? And we see how the evolution of certain conversations that seemed like outlier conversations are becoming more and more central as people start to actually understand what they're about. They have a context for holding it rather than a reaction to the slogan. And I think a sloganism is a way to separate people out. It's an authoritarian tactic. And so you want to counter that with good conversation, interest in the other person, listening to the other person's perspective, and sharing your own.
I lived in a large building in the village at one point, and it was a community laundromat down in the basement. And so I'm down there, I'm taking out my wash out of the dryer, and there's a woman next to me who's putting her stuff into the dryer, into the wash. And she, hello, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And she said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a therapist. Blah, blah. I said, well, what do you do? She said, oh, you probably wouldn't know what I do. I'm a daytime actress on TV. And I have this show. And, okay, well, blah, blah. I said, would I know it? And she said, well, I don't know. Turns out it was Susan Lucci.
I love it.
And so I said, do you do your wash every Tuesday? And so we're here.
You should have had her sign a pillowcase.
This famous, world-class actress,
Yeah.
and we're doing the same. We're having this great bonding experience. It was really a great wash story.
Yeah. No, everything happens at the laundromat. It is that. I mean, there's. That's why they have like cafes and laundromats. They have bars. People just, everything goes away because the laundry is the same. It's a totally egalitarian kind of social space because
I mean, wasn't for COVID, you would see the next explosion of an area of while people wait for their laundry being done. There's a cafe and a restaurant going on.
Yeah, totally.
And there's a perfect community place where you can do politics, where you can get your message.
Yes, and where you can go in and listen to each other. When we launched Washerwomen Vote, we were in the community. We were going around to the laundromats and sharing. We had bags and buttons and info sheets, and we were just starting. And I have to tell you, I was just completely. It was a gift to me to go and do that work and to have the conversations with the owners and the women and men who were folding the laundry or doing the laundry. And I went into one laundromat, and it was a Chinese American family. The mother and the aunt were immigrants from China, and they did not speak English, but they had been working in the laundry for over like 20 years. The daughter, for whom they sacrificed much, had gone to an Ivy League school, but was now back managing the family business, the laundromat. Right. And she had an 8-year-old daughter who was riding her bicycle in. So we're in this laundromat, and it's hard to get all of this story out in a soundbite, but I go in and I'd like to share a little bit. Here's a button, here's a bag, and here's some information. So we're really here to honor the washerwomen. And I started telling the story of WASH and Washerwomen Vote. And then she introduced her mom and her aunt, and and they came around, and she translated for her mom and her aunt, and her daughter came around, and the smile, the sense of like, you came here to honor us, you know, of the mother and the aunt. I mean, it's extraordinary. That happened a number of times that day. Most of the laundromats we walked into were owned or were supported by people who had recently immigrated. It's not unusual that a laundromat is a point of entry into our economy, right? This is even ages ago. It was one of the first kind of trades for women taking in laundry, and each one was so surprised. Why are you here? What do you mean? Like you're here to honor, like where? And the answer was yes. You have no idea how much all of us who are engaged in WASH are really consciously thinking and appreciating and caring for our whole community that starts with those who show up to do the hard work. And that's hard work.
I think right now is where we should have held up the button that says, you know, I'm a washerwoman, I vote, and you show them the website where they can buy the button and wear it, and then the money that we make from that we can do into, you know, political activism to make sure that
that's great.
People need a ride to go vote,
yeah.
go register, they can get a ride to go register. I think we can do a lot more in terms of our.
That's great. I definitely want everyone to go on the website. And I want to say with great pride that something most people don't know. I started Corp Talk to fund WASH. And the reason I wanted to do that was because this concept for me is personal, it's artful, it's powerful. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to run it as an entity or a business. I've always, as you know, run it like a wash line. Everybody's welcome. There's something here. So if you come, if you can afford to contribute to buttons, then buy some buttons, but not from us. Everything on our website is free. And so we can't afford to give it away anymore. Okay, so that's how we operate. And if you're moved by what we do, we hope that you'll make a donation to the Domestic Workers Alliance or to any other real active organization that's doing the work in the streets, to Black Lives Matter, to the Cairo Center. There are lots of places out there. We
Tell
have
everybody what the website is.
Washerwomen, not woman, women, plural, vote. Washerwomenvote.com. Yeah, I hope you'll visit it. You'll see the video.
Maria, we'll make sure that in the description of today's show, we'll have that link. It will also have the link to a YouTube video that you have out there, which I think will give people a little more depth, you know, on top of everything you've said today. Ken, we have to have Maria back again because over the next couple of months, we have to make a difference, and we have to let people know that no matter where you are on the economic line, your vote counts.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
We appreciate New Cleveland Radio.
Well, I appreciate the two of you. And Ken, we will be back here next week again with another KYaks.guru. Have a great day.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ken. It's good to see both of you.